we're a nonprofit advocacy group for the St. Johns River.
And our mission is to help protect the river.
Hello, and welcome to the St. Johns Riverkeeper Show. My name is Lisa Reineman. I'm your St. Johns Riverkeeper, and we appreciate you tuning in with us today. I'm here with the very talented Shannon Blankenship, our Outreach Director. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you.
And before we start hearing about some of the great adventures that Shannon plans for you and for us out on the St. Johns River, I want to tell you a little bit about us for those of you that are just tuning into our show. We are a nonprofit organization, and the mission of the St. Johns Riverkeeper is to give the river a voice, to advocate for protective policies to make sure that no harm is brought to the St. Johns River. So many decisions that are made on our river are made in a boardroom where she does not have a voice. So we want to make sure that the river has a voice. And also we want to make sure that we celebrate the St. Johns, we educate our community on the importance of keeping the river healthy. We also investigate issues, we advocate on issues that we'll talk about in a minute. And of course, sometimes we litigate on issues if we can't come together with solutions with some of the folks out there in the community. But today we're going to mostly talk about celebrating. And that's what Shannon's all about. Shannon is about focusing on getting opportunities for us to get out on the water and have a good time, get a better understanding about the important issues that are threatening the St. Johns. And Shannon, we welcome you to the show.
Well, thank you.
And Shannon just recently got back from the Eco Heritage trip, which is a fantastic journey. I want to hear a little bit more about it.
I did. We just returned from our 32nd and 33rd St. Johns River Eco Heritage Boat Tour. And this is a boat tour that has started up almost 10 years ago now. And we've been taking trips in different capacities and different varieties, but trying to accomplish the core goal of St. Johns Riverkeeper in getting people on the river, on the water, and acquainted with the river so that they will become river stewards just like we are. So we departed from Sanford, Florida this past weekend on our 33rd St. Johns Riverkeeper Eco Heritage boat trip, and left from Sanford with 55 passengers, a full boat.
I hope you get them all back. Okay, good.
There was one scare, but but she made it. She made it. We got her on the boat. No, our captain and crew are really good about doing a head count, and we even had our new education director, Jenny Busey, joining us as well. And I asked her to please utilize some of her school field trip skills in doing those head counts so that we make sure everyone is on the boat with us every time we leave. So we departed Sanford and traversed Lake Monroe as our first stop with speaker Bill Belleville.
Great author.
That's the most perfect speaker, I think, that you want to really get people acquainted with the St. Johns River. River of Lakes, his book that he published or wrote over 10 years ago is my favorite introduction to the St. Johns River. And so having him on board to talk about the formation of the river, the ecology of the river, and then those intricate ecological connections between the wildlife and the water is a great way to start the Eco Heritage boat cruise. Our first stop was at Blue Springs, and Blue Springs is just a tremendous area for people to really understand that the St. Johns River forms not only in a marsh, but with all of these springs, these little sources of fresh water that come out from the aquifer. And Blue Springs, although it's one of my favorite stops, Jimmy Orth, our executive director, commented that it's been a little more green the past few years that we've been stopping there, not as blue as it once was.
Well, and that's an issue, as you know, we've talked about a lot, that the nutrient pollution is a big issue. It impacts our springs, it impacts the St. Johns River. Of course, the springs provide a critical freshwater source to the St. Johns, so when you have your springs polluted, it adds to the pollution of the St. Johns. And that's one thing, the reason that the St. Johns Riverkeeper, we've been fighting for the 12 years of our existence for stronger nutrient protection, making sure that we're not putting too many nutrients into the St. Johns. I've been fighting for years for higher standards. In fact, that fight just recently has been elevated to Washington, and it's in EPA's hand where the state is fighting for watered down protections, and we're standing up for stronger protections. And we ask our members to come to our website, to stjohnsriverkeeper.org, to make sure that they have a voice too, and make sure that we're keeping that nutrient pollution out of our waterways, to keep our springs blue, to keep our water pure, and to make sure we protect the health of the St. John's.
Bill Belleville was able to talk a little bit about, we do a good job sometimes with our state parks like Blue Springs in protecting them in their entirety at the source, but the recharge area of the spring is something that is not as well protected, and it really helps with the St. John's Riverkeeper mission to be able to bring people to the spring and show them that, this is Blue Spring and it's lovely, it's gorgeous, but it isn't blue anymore, and that's why we need people on board with our mission and with our cause to help continue the advocacy that we're putting forth for springs protection.
Well, and you said it earlier, when you see it, when you out and experience the river, the springs, and that's when you can become a good steward, because it is quite alarming. I know there's a great nature photographer, John Moran, who has a fantastic series of photographs that show springs then and now. And to see those, it's quite heartbreaking, but it documents what this pollution, what us not protecting the recharge areas are doing to our natural resources.
Speaking of which, on November 17th, John Moran is going to be in Jacksonville at the downtown library for one of those presentations. For anyone that hasn't seen those before and afters of the springs, he's been documenting springs as a photographer for over 30 years. And as someone who is not originally from Florida, I go to the springs today and I think they're gorgeous. These are the best, the best asset to any state that there could be. But seeing the pictures from 30 years ago, it makes it clear that we have a lot we need to do. And so on November 17th, the Late Bloomers Garden Club is going to showcase some of those photos, and he's going to be there speaking. You can easily look that up on the internet, our website.
It's on our website, yes. You can find that information on our website at stjohnsriverkeeper.org, and would love to join us, because it is quite alarming. I know I've been to one of his presentations, there were audible gasps in the audience. I happened to come to Silver Springs when I was 8 years old. It was more than 30 years ago, but not that long ago. But it was quite different experience than what I saw just back in March of this year. The pollution in Silver Springs has changed. When I went to Blue Springs back in April, it was quite phenomenal and quite sad to see it. And while these are great places to still visit and they're magical in their own right, the magic is dying on our watch, and we have to work together to do something about it.
Yeah. Well, we left the springs. We had everyone on board. Did a full head count and got back in the boat. And the next stop was at Hontoon Island. Now, Hontoon Island, I think is personally a favorite. I didn't know this, but the totems that were found there as they were channelizing the St. John's there and doing construction work that were found are actually the only totems in the United States, outside of the Pacific Northwest, found in the U.S. And so it's a really unique thing to have found them there. Of course, the totems are preserved because we have they were trapped underwater and in a abiotic atmosphere, so without the oxygen there to allow the wood to start to degrade, the totems have been preserved. So being able to have lunch there on the island and seeing those totems and just feeling the history of that location, it's an excellent first lunch spot.
That sounds great. What a great experience.
Bill Dreggers then joined us at that spot, and we departed from Hontoon Island. And I didn't know this, but Bill Dreggers is actually named Mr. DeLand, and it's obvious why. He knows everything that there is to know about that area, DeBary, DeLand, and Hontoon Island, Central Florida. So to have him on board and to be able to hear some of the stories of growing up in old Florida is just a really, really unique way to have after lunch. I do feel bad, though. Anyone that speaks after lunch while on the boat has to deal with some sleeping people, because it's the weather was just perfect. There were so many fishermen out on the water this time of year, just taking advantage of the weather, although I'm sure there's fishermen out there, rain or shine, on the St. John's. But Bill Dreggers just adds a resource to that trip that's unmeasured, and I think he's a favorite of a lot of passengers on the trip. Our next stop after Pontoon Island, we got into Astor, Florida, where we had our overnight stay. And then we departed the next morning.
I do, before you move on, I have to put in a plug for Blair's Jungle Den. It's a fantastic old Florida fish camp, and if you have a boat, you can go by boat and check in. And what a great place to stay. And I'm sorry I missed that this time, but just had to put it. There's a great family-run fish camp that is always. Lots of stories come from staying there.
You know, and I didn't realize this either, but sometimes it's hard when you're vacationing with families and you want to go see some of these old Florida towns and experience some of these new sites. It's hard to find a hotel.
Right, right.
Because they're not called hotels, they're called fish camps.
Yes,
and so
yes.
Google isn't always the most helpful with getting you a place to stay in that area. But this trip, we actually, we had to split our group up into 3 different locations. So we were not only at the Blair's Jungle Den, but we stayed at the Astor Bridge Hotel and Marina, and they are amazingly accommodating. They're right there at the Astor Bridge, so you can actually walk across the bridge over to Blackwater Inn restaurant, seafood restaurant, and have great seafood there. Also right there, Astor Bridge is the dividing line between Volusia County and I believe Lake County. I don't want to mess that up.
Right.
But there is a tree there where William Bartram stayed and camped as he was coming up the St. Johns River. And so it's just incredible to get to see some of those really old, large live oaks there in Central Florida. And so there are some historical markers too. I went out there and took some pictures of that tree and uploaded them to our Instagram page.
Nice.
It's SJ Riverkeeper is our tag on Instagram, and so I try to allow people to follow the journey of the Eco Heritage boat trip via Instagram, because it's just such a great way to share some of the pictures. And laying under that tree and seeing the branches come out, you know, it's probably looks just like it did when William Bartram was coming down the St. Johns River in the 1770s. So,
well, speaking of, doesn't William Bartram join the trip?
William Bartram does join the trip, and so on day 2, William Bartram and his companion Constance Fenimore Woolson, a famous travel writer from the 1800s in Florida, join us on the boat trip, and so we sort of get to change gears and have not only a different scenery. You know, we're more into the lower portion of the St. Johns River, out of the swamp and cypress, and into more of the marsh area. And you know, the foliage is much more like oak. And I was actually surprised. We actually saw a little bit of fall in the leaves, in Florida, which is nice to be reminded of the changing leaves color. So they joined us, and I think one of my favorite parts about that stretch of the river right there around Molaka is being able to see the Ocklawaha and the natural entrance of the Ocklawaha, and that really sort of crooked and unobtrusive entrance, as opposed to just another mile or so down the river and getting to see the Ocklawaha entrance via the Florida Barge and Canal.
Yes, yes. Well, and that's something, as you know, and I'm sure y'all talked about, is we're really focused on restoration of the Ocklawaha River. It's sad that the dam was put in many years ago, and then it was built to support the Florida Cross Barge Canal, and unfortunately fortunately that project never moved forward, but the dam still remains. And there's been a very heated issue between bass fishermen and focusing on wanting to keep the reservoir, and for those that want to restore the river. We know a healthy, free-flowing Ocklawaha River is going to bring great benefit to the St. Johns River, and we believe that the state should move forward. They've actually recommended on many years to restore the Ocklawaha River and do a partial removal of the dam. It's never been funded, and there's many statewide groups, Florida Wildlife Federation, the Defenders of Wildlife, that are fighting to have restoration of the Ocklawaha River, and we support them and hope that that'll make up. And that'll also help some of the issues that we're experiencing with Silver Spring, for the reduced flows in Silver Springs. When you dam the Ocklawaha River, it drowns out a number of the springs, and unfortunately then those springs don't produce as much fresh water, and that provides critical fresh water to the St. Johns River. So it's a very complex problem.
It's a tremendous asset to
Yes.
the passengers on the trip to not only pass by, the largest tributary to the St. Johns, providing a third of our flow, but also to be able to talk about the controversy surrounding Rodman
Yes.
Dam, because that is, what started St. Johns Riverkeeper, and so you can sort of feel when you're on that boat why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing, and so I love being able to talk about the Ocklawaha, and then also to have the historians on board that talk about how the Ocklawaha used to look, in the 1800s, when they had the old steamboats sort of moving across that crooked river, and some of the stories talk about people being able to reach up and touch the trees falling down on the sides, and so I love being able to talk about the Ocklawaha in that area. Unfortunately, the culmination of our journey is in Palatka, and we get to see the GP pipeline right there as we offload our passengers in Palatka, Florida.
Well, and Georgia Pacific, that's been another long-term issue that the St. Johns Riverkeeper has been fighting. We were very engaged early on in 2002 with fighting the pollution that was going into Rice Creek. At that point, a judge ordered Georgia Pacific to build a pipeline to the St. Johns if they couldn't meet water quality in Rice Creek. They did spend money on the plant, try to meet water quality with Rice Creek, but they never did get there. We fought with them, going back, making sure they used every technology, and also fought the pipeline, because if you're a riverkeeper, if you love a water body, you do not want to see a pipeline being built to deliver pollution to your river, to your lake, to your bay, whatever the case may be. Back earlier this year, we reported on this show that we exhausted our legal options to stop the pipeline. So we've been focusing on a 7-month negotiation on the permit. What can we do to get the most protective permit in place that will hold Georgia Pacific accountable from not putting any more than they are allowed to put in the river, and actually go above and beyond and try to do more to protect from some of the old pollution that's there. We were successful in negotiating an isolation plan to isolate 400 acres of a 900-acre pond that has that old pollution. Unfortunately, the state's giving Georgia Pacific too long to isolate those solids. The judge's order actually ordered Georgia Pacific to operate the pipeline beginning on October 15th. So right after you guys were there, they started operating the pipeline, and we're focusing on asking the state and asking our members to ask the state to do the isolation plan, require that plan, that protection from harmful dioxins as soon as possible. There is a public meeting on November 13th in Palatka. You can go to our website, and folks who want to get out and voice their concern, ask the state to require this as soon as possible, as well as we'll be doing ongoing monitoring of the compliance to make sure they stay in compliance, and we hold them accountable to what's in the permit and trying to get it more stringent. But it is a challenging place to end up your fantastic journey, because it's such a hard issue, because even if you got the most protective and permit in place, it's still not a good day for the river when you have a pipeline delivering pollution directly to the middle of the St. Johns.
Exactly, and I think, having been on the river in that area for 2 days and seeing all the people out there fishing, all the people out there doing cast nets for shrimp, the crabs pots, the buoys that are out there, and being able to talk with the people in that area and see how critical the St. Johns is just to their everyday lives. Thinking about the fact that this pipeline is about to be put into this area, and how that is either going to affect them or unfortunately not affect them, and how they continue to operate here, is I think just much more alarming. Down here in Jacksonville, you think about Palatka and being so far away, but the uniqueness of the St. Johns, in how slow flowing it is, and in how Jacksonville being we get everything that happens downstream. It's gonna get here eventually, and so knowing that we are not foreign to the Georgia Pacific issue, we will be feeling those effects of this pipe, and so it isn't the best way to end the trip, but for me personally, knowing that Riverkeeper has been involved in this permit and involved in this pipeline and involved in, the Clean Water Act and how we regulate the pollutants that enter in the water, I'm confident that we did all that we could with this, and that our legal team and our Riverkeeper is doing a great job with Georgia Pacific.
Well, it's not over, so we invite everyone to continue to engage. And speaking of Clean Water Act, the Clean Water Act is celebrating a birthday this year, a big birthday.
It is. The Clean Water Act was enacted in 1972. Surprisingly, the president at the time was Richard Nixon. And I think whenever you look back at history, and you always wonder who it was that was our most environmental president, people don't think that Richard Nixon was going to be up there. But what happened was, the Cuyahoga River caught on fire outside of Michigan, and the Exxon Valdez spill happened in the Puget Sound outside of Washington State. And all of these atrocities throughout the United States and just alarming instances of water pollution throughout the United States caused people themselves to rise up and protest and demand that we put forth a law and that our president sign a bill into law that would protect waters of the United States. So with the ultimate goal of restoring all the nation's waters to swimmable, fishable, and drinkable by 1985, the law was signed, and we are celebrating 40 years of the Clean Water Act this year.
No, that's very exciting. As part of our celebration, one of the issues that we've been working on for several months is protection of Silver Springs. Back to the springs issue, and it's actually going to come to a head very soon. One of the issues that brought that to light was the cattle rancher who's requesting to withdraw 13 million gallons of water a day from an aquifer, from an already stressed aquifer that's produced very declining flows to the Silver Springs and other springs in the area. And then they're also putting cattle on this area, and they're going to have a lot of fertilizer, a lot of runoff, a lot of manure, which is going to cause a nutrient disaster as well. The applicant, the cattle rancher, is being smart. They've asked for less water, and they're putting fewer cows on this property, but it's a severely damaged spring already, and the flows have been reduced dramatically. So even 5 million gallons of water, which is a lot of water still for cows in an overly taxed system, it's going to have an impact on the flow of Silver Spring, as well as it's a severely polluted spring, back to the algae and the things that's going on. In fact, for this spring system to get back to a somewhat healthy condition where it could absorb pollution, the current polluters need to reduce their pollution by 79%. And that's not Riverkeeper's number, that's the state's number. And so it's an unattainable goal. So to allow any more pollution than that, it's going to degrade the system. And so the Clean Water Act is a tool we can use to focus on making sure that there's not any harm brought to this very special spring, as well as making sure we're protecting all of the waters throughout the state of Florida. So that's going to start coming to a head, we believe, in November. So again, ask members out there and all those folks that experience this great boat trip to go to our website and to follow what's going on our Facebook page, and to make sure that they get engaged on this very critical issue and celebrate the Clean Water Act by using it to protect our waters.
Yeah, and it's going to sound ironic, but I really love being able to talk about the Adena Springs Ranch issue, because I feel like it highlights the two really critical threats that the St. Johns River is facing right now. First, the water quantity issue.
Yes.
So much water being drawn out for an activity of this type to support grass-fed cattle. And then second, water quality. We're drawing out all of that water so that then we can have a cattle farm which is going to put the nitrates right back into an already taxed system. And explaining sometimes how these issues affect the St. Johns River, quantity and quality. Adena Springs Ranch is the perfect example of what we shouldn't be allowing in our watershed, in a taxed watershed like we have, and especially not in Silver Springs, which is facing so many threats right now.
Economic activity in that area. It provides hundreds of jobs, and it's a very important system. And it is, again, it's critical to St. John's because of the fresh water it supplies her, but also it shows that if we can't save Silver Springs, if we can't use Florida law to protect one of our national landmarks and #1 tourist destinations, how can we save it? We need to focus on these laws to make sure they protect these waterways. We all know that once they're damaged, it's much more expensive to restore them, if they're even restorable. Again, a 79% reduction in nitrate pollution is an unattainable goal. And so when you look at the cost of restoration, it's the much more conservative thing to do is to focus on preventing any pollution to enter these waterways, prevent any harm and more further reduction in flow. And that's what we're asking our regulatory agencies at the Water Management District in the state to do, is to prevent any further harm, which is going to make we're going to pass that tipping point of it being ever to come back to what it once was.
Exactly. I think the Clean Water Act is sort of our channel for advocates, for people that are attempting to restore our waterways, like the goal of the law is. And so in trying to sort of bring about celebration of the fact that we have the Clean Water Act and celebrate the successes that it's put forth, for example, even setting standards on pollutants entering the river, setting goals for those pollutants, and even categorizing pollutants. The Clean Water Act has done a lot for us in the 40 years since it was incepted. And so for that, St. John's Riverkeeper is planning a birthday party for the Clean Water Act on October the 24th at Sadler Point Marina. It's facing the entry of both the Ortiga and the St. John's, and we're going to have live music from Canary in a Coal Mine, which is a great local band that I've seen.
Great band for what we're experiencing with Silver Springs.
It all is very fitting. We'll have a food truck. Super Food Truck's going to be out there. Sweetwater Brewing Company is which is also a great environmental steward.
They've been a great supporter of the Riverkeepers across the southeast.
Well, good beer comes from clean water. Is their logo.
We'll drink to that.
Drink to that on October 24th. But
and also kids games. There'll be kids activities for those of us with kids to run around and celebrate.
Our education director is putting together some great activities. We have an ecology Jenga, which I haven't advertised too much because I think everyone wonders what that is. But once you realize when you take out pieces of an ecosystem, it will all collapse. Is sort of the thought behind the ecological Jenga. And then for the younger kids, we're going to have pollution painting. And so she's going to have a bunch of paints out there, and there's going to be a picture where you can draw what the river should look like and then what the river would look like without the Clean Water Act. So lots of ways to get the kids involved. And then for the adults, we'll have some trivia. I love doing trivia for adults, and just to sort of, in these places where we are and we're all having fun and talking about these things, to be able to sort of, put that thought in your mind and make you think for a second about some of these issues. And so that's a great way to highlight the Clean Water Act.
Well, Shannon, thank you so much for coming today. This has been an exciting show and a great opportunity to talk about how much fun we can have out on the river, as well as talking about these issues that are so important. And back to where you started, it is about experience in the river, and that will breed good stewardship. And we need more stewards, we need more advocates, because we're faced with more and more issues. And so for those folks that missed the birthday party, we want to ask all of our folks to come out and focus on coming to our website at stjohnsriverkeeper.org. Help us celebrate the St. Johns River and the Clean Water Act by becoming an advocate for the St. Johns River. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a good week.